We'll start at that end with Robert Carradine.
Thanks for coming out, y'all. I know it's supposed to rain any second, but so far it's holding off.
Next, we have Mr. Claude Jarman, Jr. Closer, they say.
Like Frank Sinatra? I mean,
Yeah.
is that better? Okay.
Darby's got his microphone facing the audience. Can you believe that?
I want to hear what they have to say. What I have to say.
All right, and now we're going to have Darby Hinton, but he's already done his, so we're going to skip him and go to Cheryl Rogers Barnett.
Hi, glad to be back.
And next to me, we have Mr. Patrick Wayne.
I am going to petition for more porta potties, okay? Let's get them.
Yeah, oh, Diamond Farnsworth is here, is he? Can't see him for Mike. And that bad boy grew up in Hollywood, too.
I think his dad was an actor, wasn't he? I think.
He ain't claimed to be an actor.
Well, all right.
Somebody Robert Duvall called the best natural actor of all times.
And look, at Darby's already forgotten to use the microphone.
Because it doesn't work. Does this work?
It does work.
I have to cut your microphone.
Makes a big difference, pal. So, we're talking today about growing up in Hollywood, and it's changed a lot since this group went to school there. I know that let's start with Claude, because he went to school with some of the icons at MGM when he was shooting The Yearling, and he was under contract at MGM. That was the biggest, most popular, and famous lot in Hollywood, and a lot of stars were there. Claude, who were some of the people you went to school with?
Well, I had a life-changing experience. When I was 10 years old, I was taken out of a schoolroom, 5th grade in Nashville, Tennessee, and a month later, I was in Hollywood going to a one-room school with Elizabeth Taylor,
Nice.
Margaret O'Brien,
Nice.
Jane Powell, Dean Stockwell. We went to school for 3 hours a day, and if you were working, they would have a tutor, and then you would still have to do your school time. So we would go back when I wasn't working, and we would go back to Nashville, and I actually entered a school back there, and when I would come back to make a movie, I would get the work. The school would give me the assignments that I would have to adhere to sort of stay both. When we're talking about it, it was very hard to learn anything. For example, in The Yearling, I was in practically every scene, so I did not get any breaks. And you had to be in school. You had to get the 3 hours in, and they passed a law in L.A. that you had to have that school in by 4 o'clock. They would shut everything down while I would go to school, and these people would sit around and wait.
Wow.
And then at 4 o'clock, I don't get any break. It's like, let's go to work. So it was very, very hard. And I don't know how I learned anything, frankly, because it was very hard to concentrate on both. And but it's just the way it was. And when I was at MGM, when I wasn't working, to be in the school, it was great. 3 hours. We would have 15 minutes at 10:30 for recess. And Margaret O'Brien had a tutor, so her mom didn't want her to go to school with us mortals. so she could come down and spend 15-minute recess with us. And but it was very hard. Then at noon, everybody would go, and a lot of these kids, like Elizabeth Taylor, she sort of went through the school system, but I don't think she really was that into it. But all these kids were really smart, so they could pick up what they wanted to. And but it was a good way of, you were around people who were very intelligent and had a good work ethic, and so from that it was something that you wanted to keep up with them.
Well, the studio system, they do not have it like that anymore, but even in the television era, even though the studios were reducing the scale of motion pictures, the television age was booming. And so we had people who were child actors working on TV series and going to school in the daytime. Now Darby, as a 10-year-old lead in the Daniel Boone series, what was school like for you?
Well, it was fun. Like you said, we didn't have the exact amount of people because we would have our own school teacher that would follow us to the set and, teach me out on a log, or usually the back of a car was where I got most of my schooling. But it was a nice day. We could be out on a log. But if I wasn't actually working, we would go to the main schoolhouse on the Fox lot at Pico. And that is where there was a wonderful teacher there called Francis Clamp, who taught everybody from Shirley Temple. There's a couple of great desks there where all these people carved their names in the desk, and somewhere they probably threw it out. I don't know, but that would be a fun one to have. But yeah, it was 3 hours a day is what we were required to get. It was supposed to be in at least 15-minute chunks, which it usually wasn't. It was any time that you weren't actually in front of the camera. They didn't need you for lighting or anything.
Well, if you were in the middle of an intense learning session with your teacher and they said, "We need you now on set," what would happen?
They would come and pull you, and you'd go on set, and you'd be getting ready to do a scene with a Woody Strode or some great actor, and you're thinking, man, I know that spelling test. What was that? And you keep thinking of that, and then you do the scene. They say, cut, quick, back to school. And you'd run to school, and you'd sit down and go, man, I could have done that scene better if I'd only done that. So it was a challenge sometimes. But that's why they wanted you to try to get it in chunks. But it's just kind of what the director needed.
Now, I know you had your own teacher, but on the 20th Century Fox lot at that time, there were so many other shows happening, like Lost in Space with Billy Mooney.
Angela Cartwright, who my sister on the show was Veronica Cartwright. They were together. Yeah, anybody that was working at Fox at the time. Land of the Giants, Stephen Armgren. A lot of fun people.
In the series, because they weren't all adult guest stars, there were child actors who would come in and do episodes too. When they came in, would they have the same teacher you had?
Yes, they would all share my teacher.
Did they learn as much as you did?
Well, that's the rough thing if you think about it as a kid. You get yanked out of school. You got yanked out of school for a fabulous career. But a lot of these kids, they get out of school for like a week, and then they get thrown back into their regular school. So, and if they're good, they get what they were supposed to study that week ahead, and our teacher helps them. But that was the problem if you're out on a series for a couple of years and get thrown back in. So that's the challenge of learning sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Now, Cheryl, you weren't a child actor, but you did go on the lots all the time, and your dad, of course, the superstar, the king of the Cowboys, Roy Rogers. Let's hear it for Roy. What was childhood like for you?
Well, my experience was quite different in that I didn't have to go to school there. I just loved it because I started going with Dad when I was like 2 years old, I guess, because my mother had really bad pregnancies and wasn't feeling well, so Dad would take me to work with him. And I got to go to the big kids' school, and I thought that was the greatest thing in the world. So I loved that experience, and I got to go to school way ahead of where I would have been normally. It also, just being on the lot, we had the Western Street, and we had the Mexican Street, and the street that was more like New York City. And so it was like Disneyland, and it was way before there was a Disneyland. So I was fascinated. I thought it was wonderful.
And Bobby, when you were going to school, your first film, you were 17 years old when you made The Cowboys. Let's hear it for John Wayne and the Cowboys too. Okay, that's a great film. He was the oldest of the little cowboys. Slim, they called him. We don't call him that anymore.
All right, that's one for
But you moved around a lot as a kid because of your dad. had different locations for schooling. What was that like, having to reacquaint yourself each time there was a move?
Well, I'm still stuck on the Cowboys because, you know, when you're under the age of 18, you got to have a guardian. And here I was going to spend 15 weeks on this film with Patrick's dad, and my brother David was not interested at all in being my guardian. So we selected A. Martinez as my guardian.
Oh my.
Who was,
How old was he?
I think he was 22, maybe. So anyhow, we were rooming together. As I recall, the Cowboys had to double up in rooms, so you're sharing a room. And I got drunk one night with A, and that's how I got my own room. So the thing that was so great, though, I was in a program at Hollywood High where I only had to go to school for half a day. So that meant on location, I was done like at 10 o'clock in the morning. The rest of those poor sons of bitches had to stay there till 1. So I'd go out, and whenever you're not in school or on the set, you're supposed to practice your roping. So I'd go practice my roping, and one day I was out there practicing my roping, and I heard this horse coming at a pretty good clip. And I turned around and I looked behind me, and it's Patrick's dad on Dollar, his horse, and he had the horse's head pulled all the way the wrong way around, you know, trying to get him to stop. And he wasn't stopping, and all the wranglers were hell-bent trying to catch up with him, and what they're doing was just making him go faster. So I did what, the place I was practicing my roping was right in front of the camp, the house that Duke Wayne lived in the movie. And then right next to the house was like a little carport looking thing, and then another little area with a bunch of wagons in it. Well, this carport looking thing was maybe 6.5 feet high, and it would have taken him off like right around here. And I just did what the wranglers did when they were trying to get a horse's attention. I whistled and waved my arms, and the horse turned up. And so I saved your dad's life, Patrick.
Well, after you directed him during that shoot, I think you needed some brownie points with him.
Yeah, the directing part was, I'd been on the location about a week, and it's a scene where we're trying to break this bucking horse named Little Alice, Crazy Alice. And each one of us, we take 8, if we make it to 8 seconds, he'll consider us come higher in time. So anyhow, this one kid is about ready to get on the horse, and A. Martinez shows up, jumps on Crazy Alice, breaks her, makes her back up, spin, count. I mean, he totally broke the horse, and he rides the horse right up to this little kid and says, "Here you go, kid. Maybe you can ride her now." And he just jumps off the fence, and they start going at it. So I jump off the fence and start going at it to save the little kid from A. Martinez. And Mr. Wayne breaks us up and says, "Okay, you, get back up on that fence where you belong." And he's saying it to me. And I said, "Hold on a second, Mr. Wayne. I'm the head kid. I don't think you should tell me to get on the fence where I belong. I think you should just tell me to get back on the fence." That didn't go over well. But after I saved his life, he came out to watch me practice my roping. I felt a presence, and I looked, and it was him, and I thought, "Oh boy, here we go." And he said, "The roping looks pretty good." "Well, thank you, Mr. Wayne. Pretty nice day we're having." Yeah, it is, Mr. Wayne. "Carry on, lad." He turned around and walked away. And I said, he just apologized.
Well, Patrick, what was it like growing up with that man whose presence you could feel coming up behind you as a little kid?
May I borrow your mic?
Yeah, it's yours, sir. Help yourself.
Well, I made several films with him, and most of the films that I do with him, at one point or another in the film, he knocked me on my butt. And that's pretty much what my life was like growing up with him. But the schooling thing, we've been talking generally about schooling. I had a more traditional schooling because most of the films that I worked on were in the summertime when you didn't have to go to school. But Mr. Roberts, it was shot during the school year, and we were in Hawaii. We were on Midway Island and in Hawaii, Honolulu, and the teacher came along, and I think I was in my second year of high school. And he says, well, what are you studying? I said, I'm second year Latin, first year Greek, algebra. And the guy stopped me right there. He says, whoa, you're on your own. I can't help you with any of this. There I was. So,
You were going to Catholic school.
That's right, parochial schools. I was at Loyola High School at the time, Jesuit trained. And somehow muddled through it, so I was on my own. The teachers weren't that well trained, but they kind of watched over you, made sure you were doing the work, but he couldn't help me too much with that.
Well, they were from the LA City school system.
No, yeah, it's a different deal, different than the parochial schools.
Well, even sometimes back then they didn't have to be accredited. That's something that Paul Peterson.
I'm not from the Stone Ages. It wasn't that long ago, for God's sake. Thank you.
It wasn't that long ago that you didn't have to have accredited teachers on the set. They were more like guardians. And a friend of a lot of ours here, Paul Peterson, was one of the ones made sure they stepped up and made sure they at least had accredited teachers to teach them.
Well, moving past the teachers, with your parents, because you are, growing up, I know, Darb, your dad had been an actor, so you fell right into auditioning as a Hollywood kid. What was that like?
Yeah, besides the chunk of, for the 6 years that I did Daniel Boone. And then after that, I kind of wanted to see what it was to be a regular kid. So, I did a couple things. I did a drug pusher on Hawaii Five-0, a drug addict on the Bold Ones. I kept trying to break out of the all-American, Israel image.
But he wore his
job.
coon cap in all of those shows, too. So it was made it difficult for you.
Yeah, I don't know why they kept thinking that. So I did that, and I worked a bunch, but then I wanted to go off to school and see what it was to be a normal kid, because, I never went to a regular school until junior high school.
And what was the reaction of the school kids when you came in? Did they know who you were as an actor?
Oh, yeah. Well, you got to remember we all know this, right? Daniel Boone was on when there were 3 networks and then one show on it. So, if you were watching TV, it was a 1 out of 3 shot. We had over 30 million people watching us by our 3rd or 4th season. So, yeah, they knew who I was. And I got thrown in there, and it was a lot of, let's see if you're as tough as you were in Daniel Boone, and my girlfriend thinks you're cute, and I got beat up a lot. Because I didn't have, like you said, I lost my dad. I never had an older brother. I didn't know how to fight back. I took direction well. Teachers loved me. So I got bullied a lot.
Now, Bobby, you went to public school, but because you hadn't been an actor yet, but obviously you had a famous father, a very famous brother. What was the reaction to you from other kids in school?
Well, by the time I got into public school, I was in the 11th grade, because I've been in a private school for 6 years in Ojai, California. So I went from a student body of about 200 people to about 5,000, because Hollywood High had a lot of kids. And I tried to get in the school play, and I couldn't get the job.
Who were some of the other students at Hollywood High at that time?
Well, Rita Wilson comes to mind, head cheerleader. She was real cute. But then after the Cowboys, I thought, well, now I'll get in the school play. So I tried out for one of these parts in the Admirable Crichton, classic high school play. And I talked my brother, his best friend, my other brother, the girlfriends, everybody to come down and see me in this play. And my line was, "Aye, aye, sir." I mean, one guy drove to Hollywood from Venice. He said, "I drove here from Venice to see Aye, aye, sir." But the kind of the high point of my Hollywood High School acting career was they had a program where students could direct a play. And I got cast in this play, and it went really well because I had more than one word to say. And I'll never forget this. After the play was over, it was called Spoon River Anthology. But after the play was over, I walked out, and I overheard this one kind of loudmouth little son of a bitch saying, "God, did you see Carradine? You couldn't even tell he was acting." And I was like, "Yes."
That's good.
Now, Cheryl, you went to school and normal livelihood, in the Valley, I think, is where you were growing up, in the San Fernando Valley. Was that a normal existence for you, even though you were the daughter of the king of the cowboys?
Well, I bounced back and forth between public and private. I was precocious, I guess, is a good word. And Mom always sort of had me balancing back and forth between convent and
Yes, your mother would.
yes, and public school. But it's one of those things where just having the Rogers last name, when I would first be in school, I'd walk into a classroom and the kids would whinny or something. And I remember following some girls in high school. We had just moved out to Chatsworth, and so I was going to Canoga Park High School, and there was two girls going down the steps of the science building in front of me, and they said, "Oh, Roy Rogers' daughter is going to school here. Have you seen her yet?" And the other one says, "Oh, yes, she's just so snobby." And they're right there, 2 steps in front of me, and looking back and looking around. They've got no idea who I am, but I'm very snobby, yeah.
Boy, that's too bad. Now, Claude, when you were in Hollywood, was your family out here or just your father?
No, my family came out for 2 years. My older sister, she was 18 months older than I was. She went to school in Westwood. They really did not like living in Hollywood. They wanted to go back to Nashville, which they did, and my father stayed with me. And during that 5-year period, I made 6 films at MGM, so I was pretty much working all the time. And so that's why they went back. They said, "Well, you're not even around. We might as well, and you're always on location, so we'll just live and you can come back and see us." But it was, as far as the livelihood of what my father, we sort of enjoyed it. We would go to sporting events on weekends, and Clarence Brown, who was director and who did 2 films, I did 2 films with, had a big ranch out in Calabasas. He said, "Come out anytime and swim," and he had a plane, so he would fly us out there to his ranch, and so it was, but it was kind of an isolated livelihood. I never was around a lot of kids, except the people that were on the MGM lot. So I never had the opportunity in Hollywood to mingle, with other people. I was at MGM for 5 years, and it was really during the golden days of Hollywood, because the studio, you go to, they have 30 sound stages, and at one time every one of them was in use for a film. So that was really the best. And then by 1950, when television arrived, it all collapsed, and that was the end of Hollywood as we knew it. But I was at MGM for 5 years, and then after that, I made about 6 or 7 other movies. But that time I was back in Nashville, and was working when the opportunity came up. But it was quite a wonderful experience. Never forget it, and I'm glad I did it. But I don't know whether I want to do it again. Okay.
Thank you. And this is Lone Pine at its best, with this great group of celebrities and filmmakers who've joined us here today. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.